My name is Emily Carter, and for the first time in my life, I thought I'd outrun the past. At 34, I had everything I once believed belonged to other people, a sleek apartment in downtown Austin, a title that finally sounded important, senior financial risk analyst, and a bank account that no longer made me flinch. Every promotion, every sleepless night of work, was a quiet rebellion against where I came from. I poured myself a glass of wine, the city lights spilling across the floor like liquid gold. The hum of traffic below was steady, safe. This is mine, I thought. Not borrowed, not begged earned. Then someone knocked. A sharp, deliberate sound, not a neighbor, not delivery. My pulse stuttered. When I opened the door, two strangers stood where my piece used to be. The woman smiled first. Lydia Benson, my mother. The last time I'd seen that face. I was 9 and crying at the window as she drove away with another man. She looked almost the same now, elegant, polished, but her eyes searched me like a bank statement. Not a daughter. Beside her slouched a tall 19-year-old with an easy smirk and headphones around his neck. Ryan Benson, my half-brother, the one she built a new life around after leaving me behind. Emily, Lydia said brightly, as if 25 years were just a bad signal on the line. Look at you. You've done so well. My throat went dry. What are you doing here? Ryan barely looked up from his phone. Nice place, he muttered. Kinda small for someone who makes 6 figures. Lydia's smile tightened. We came because we need your help. She hesitated, glancing around at the apartment again before landing on me. Ryan's starting college this fall. His tuition is $60,000 a year. We were hoping maybe you could support him, just for a while. The words hit harder than any childhood memory. After decades of silence, she hadn't come for me. She'd come for my money. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the glass. Inside, my heartbeat filled the silence. For years, I'd studied numbers, risk, trust, loss. But in that moment, standing in my own doorway, I realized I'd never calculated the cost of being found. The night after my mother's visit, sleep wouldn't come. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the drip of rain outside felt amplified against the silence she left behind. I kept replaying her voice, that syrupy sweetness laced with entitlement. You've done so well. It wasn't praise, it was inventory. I sat at my kitchen counter long past midnight, a stack of unopened birthday cards beside me, one for every year she'd remembered I existed. I'd never had the courage to throw them out, but I never read them either. Each envelope was a reminder that she'd known where I was all along, and still, she'd never come back. My mind drifted backward to Ohio, to the night everything fell apart. I was 9. My father, Thomas Carter, had just come home from the garage, his hands black with grease, his eyes tired but soft when he smiled at me. I'd been waiting at the window, watching my mother, Lydia Benson, pace the porch with a suitcase. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look at me when she left. The door slammed, and that sound, final and hollow, became the rhythm of my childhood. Dad tried to make life normal. He cooked pancakes on Sundays, even when the milk was sour and the flour ran low. We'd sit at the chipped kitchen table, pretending syrup made up for everything we'd lost. He told me stories about people who built their own luck, who never waited for someone to rescue them. You've got to make your own light. Emmy, he said once, flipping a pancake too high and laughing when it landed half on the stove. The world doesn't hand it out. When the bills stacked up, he took extra shifts. I started working. 2 babysitting, delivering newspapers before sunrise. At 13, my backpack carried homework and grocery receipts in equal measure. We didn't have much, but we had a rhythm quiet, steady. Ours. I remember one night, walking into the garage after closing hours, Dad was sitting on the concrete floor, head bowed, a stack of unpaid invoices beside him. His eyes met mine, and he smiled like it was nothing. Just numbers, kiddo, he said, tucking them away. We'll figure it out. He always did. Somehow, we scraped by. But no matter how busy I stayed, the jobs, the studying, the scholarships, a part of me always waited for her. Every birthday, I'd tell myself, maybe this year she'll show up. Maybe this time, she'll mean it. By the time I left for college, I'd buried that hope under deadlines and exhaustion. Success became my shield. I thought if I climbed high enough, the past couldn't touch me. Yet here she was again, decades later, standing in my apartment with her manicured nails and her impossible request. I looked at those unopened envelopes, the edges yellowed, the handwriting too familiar. Then I slid them into the trash. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt, only relief. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I knew something wasn't finished. The past doesn't knock once and leave. It lingers outside, waiting for you to open the door again. The following morning, the city looked unchanged. Sunlight bouncing off glass towers, people rushing with coffee cups and earbuds, but everything inside me felt off balance. I spent the day at the firm, staring at spreadsheets that refused to blur into numbers. My brain kept replaying my mother's face, the careful way she'd said, "We need your help," as if she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. By lunch, I'd convinced myself to push it aside. I was good at compartmentalizing. I'd spent my life doing it. I focused on work, meetings, data, deadlines. But when I came home that evening, a text waited on my phone. "Lydia, I'm sorry if I upset you. Let's meet tomorrow, just us." There's so much you don't understand. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, block her number, pretend none of it happened. The other part, the 9-year-old who'd once watched her drive away, wanted answers. So, against every instinct I had, I agreed. We met at a small cafe near the river, one of those places where conversations sound softer over the hum of jazz and espresso machines. Lydia was already there, immaculate as always, a pale scarf draped around her neck. She smiled when she saw me, that same too bright smile. "Emily," she said, reaching for my hand. "I've missed you more than you know. I didn't take it. Then why did you leave?" Her expression flickered just for a second, then steadied. "Your father made it impossible. He turned you against me. I tried to write, but..." She trailed off, letting the words hang like smoke. I knew it was a lie. Dad had begged her to visit. I remembered him waiting by the phone every Christmas, hoping she'd call, but hearing her twist the truth still cut deep. Then came the real reason she'd asked to meet. Her voice lowered, practiced, and trembling. "Ryan's tuition is due next month. If you could just help us for a little while, $3,000 a month, maybe family looks out for each other." There it was again, that word, family, shaped like a weapon. I felt the air leave my lungs. She wasn't here to make peace. She was here to price it. I pushed back my chair and stood. "You left your family 25 years ago. Lydia, don't come back and pretend it still exists." The moment I walked out of that cafe, I told myself it was over. I'd said what needed to be said. I'd closed the door she'd tried to pry open, but guilt is a stubborn echo, and it followed me all the way home. For hours, I paced my apartment, replaying her words, wondering if there was even a sliver of truth in her story about my father. Was he really the one who kept her away? Had I built my life on a lie I never questioned by midnight? I caved and called my dad. He sounded surprised, but happy to hear from me. His voice, rough and warm, carried the same patience it always had. I didn't tell him about the cafe right away. I asked how he'd been, if the garage was still holding up, if he'd been sleeping. But when I finally mentioned Lydia, his tone shifted. "She found you, didn't she?" he said quietly. I froze. "You knew she might." He sighed. "She's been calling around, asking about you. I didn't think she'd actually show up. She said you kept her from me." I whispered. For a moment, there was only silence. Then he laughed, not bitterly, just tired. "Emmy, I called her every month for 2 years after she left. She changed her number, moved twice, sent one letter asking for money. That's the last I heard from her. Don't let her rewrite history." His words settled over me like armor. The ache of doubt eased. The picture snapped back into focus. Lydia hadn't come for closure, she'd come for currency. The next afternoon, my doorbell rang again. My stomach dropped before I even looked. Through the peephole, Lydia and Ryan standing in the hallway as if nothing had happened. "Emily, we need to talk," Lydia said the moment I opened the door. "Please, don't shut us out." Ryan rolled his eyes. "This is getting ridiculous. Just give her the money so we can go." I almost laughed. The nerve. But something in her eyes made me step aside. Not compassion, curiosity. I needed to know how far she'd go. They sat on my couch, Lydia clutching her purse like it held the truth. She started again with soft words, circling the same story, how hard things were, how Ryan's future was on the line. Then her tone shifted, sharper. "You make 6 figures. Emily, you could help us without even noticing it's gone." I felt my chest tighten. "That's not your concern." Her eyes narrowed. "You've become so cold. Your father's influence, no doubt. Always playing the martyr." Something inside me snapped. "You left him with nothing. You left me with nothing." The mask slipped then. The warmth in her voice vanished. "You think you're better than us? Money doesn't make you family." I pointed to the door. "No. But it shows who still earns their way in." They left. But I knew the way she looked back before the door closed, she wasn't finished, and neither was the storm she'd brought with her. I barely slept that night. Every time the air conditioner kicked on, I thought it was the buzzer. My body was on alert, waiting for the next intrusion. By sunrise, I told myself I was done being afraid. Lydia had already taken too much of my childhood. I wasn't letting her take my peace. 2. I went through my morning routine on autopilot: coffee, emails, silence, but nothing felt normal. Every ping of my phone made my heart skip. When it finally buzzed again, I told myself I wouldn't look. I looked anyway. "Lydia, we need to talk. I didn't mean for it to go like that. Please." Open the door. She was outside. I walked to the window, and there she was, standing on the sidewalk. Ryan beside her. Both of them looking like they belonged to another world. Lydia waved as if we were old friends. Ryan didn't even glance up from his phone. I thought about ignoring them, but I also knew Lydia. If I didn't open that door, she'd find another way in through guilt, through manipulation, through persistence. And maybe a small, irrational part of me wanted to believe she'd finally come to apologize. So, I buzzed them in. The moment they stepped inside, the air changed. Lydia was too calm, her smile too careful. Ryan flopped on the couch, sprawling out like he owned the place. "Thanks for letting us in," Lydia said. "You didn't answer your phone." "I didn't want to," I replied flatly. She pretended not to hear me and started talking about my job, how impressive it was, how much she'd bragged to people about her successful daughter. Every word felt rehearsed. Then, almost casually, she asked how much I earned. I froze. "Why would you ask that?" Her expression didn't change. "Because family shares." "Emily, you've built something wonderful, and Ryan's trying to do the same. We're just asking for a little help." Ryan finally looked up, smirking. "You've got money to spare. What's the big deal?" That was when the chill really set in. This wasn't about help, it was about entitlement. I crossed my arms, forcing my voice to stay even. I already said no. The silence stretched. Then Lydia stood, moving closer, her tone turning sharp. "You're really going to turn your back on us? After everything I've done for you?" I almost laughed. "You mean leaving us when I was 9, or the birthday cards that stopped meaning anything 20 years ago?" Her eyes flashed. "Your father poisoned you against me. He made you cold." I took a step back, the fury building. "No, Mom, you did that all by yourself." Ryan muttered something under his breath. And when I turned, he was at my desk, my laptop screen glowing. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "Just looking," he said with a shrug. "You've got all these accounts open. It's not like you're hiding it." I lunged forward, slamming the lid shut. My hands shook as I grabbed it away from him. That was when I saw the email on the screen. My father's name in the header. A forwarded message from his account to hers. My salary, my company, my address. I looked at Lydia. Horror turning to disbelief. "You hacked Dad's email." Her face went pale, then hard. "I had to know how you were doing." "No," I said quietly, trembling. "You had to know how much you could take." That's when I realized it wasn't family at my door anymore. It was a threat. And I wasn't going to let them cross another line. For a long moment, none of us moved. My pulse hammered so hard I could hear it in my ears. Lydia stood frozen, her polished calm cracking at the edges. Ryan shifted beside her, pretending not to notice the tension, scrolling on his phone as if the air wasn't thick with betrayal. I held the laptop against my chest like a shield. "You broke into Dad's email," I asked again. Louder this time. "How long have you been watching me?" Lydia's voice came out steady, but her hands fidgeted with her purse strap. "Don't exaggerate. Emily, I just needed information." "Your father wouldn't tell me anything." "You know how secretive he is." My laugh was bitter. Secretive. "He worked 16-hour days to keep food on the table while you disappeared into someone else's life." Her eyes hardened. "You think I had it easy? You have no idea what I've been through." Ryan scoffed. "Can we stop the family therapy session and just get what we came for?" I turned on him. "What you came for? My money, my passwords, what's next? My identity." Lydia flinched, her mask slipping. "Don't be dramatic. We just need help. You're successful now. It's your turn to give back." Something inside me snapped. "Give back to the woman who abandoned us." "You gave me life, then spent mine running from it." She blinked, stunned, maybe by the truth she'd spent decades avoiding. "You sound just like your father." She spat. "Thank God for that." I shot back. For a moment, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Then I moved toward the door. "Get out. Both of you." Lydia didn't move. "You'd really call the police on your own mother." I held up my phone. "Try me." Ryan rolled his eyes, but his voice wavered. "Mom, let's go." She hesitated, her stare cold and unreadable, then grabbed his arm. "You're making a mistake, Emily. Family is forever." "No," I said quietly. "Family ends when it crosses this line." They left without another word, the door clicking shut like a gavel, for a long time. I just stood there, staring at the knob, waiting to breathe again. When I finally turned back to my laptop, the screen glared up at me, my father's email chain still open, proof of her intrusion. I checked my accounts. There were multiple failed login attempts, all from the same location. I saved screenshots, every timestamp, every trace. Years of data work made me precise, methodical. This time, the numbers were personal. I called Dad. His voice shook when I told him. "She used my account." "She did," I said. "I'm locking everything down." He sighed heavily. "I'm so sorry." "Emmy, don't be," I said. "It's not your fault she's like this." When I hung up, I stared at the city outside, lights flickering against the dark. For years, I'd convinced myself success could keep me safe. That money, distance, and silence could build walls high enough to keep the past out. But I was wrong. The past doesn't break in to apologize. It breaks in to take what it couldn't keep, and I wasn't going to let it take another thing from me. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling through the blinds and the uneasy silence that follows a storm. My apartment looked untouched, but nothing felt secure anymore. The night before had redrawn every line I thought I'd buried. My mother wasn't just someone I'd outgrown, she was someone I had to protect myself from. I gathered everything screenshots of failed login attempts. The forwarded email from Dad's account, the IP traces. Years of working in data analytics had made me obsessive about proof, and now that precision felt like armor. Still, my hands trembled as I organized each file. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was my life. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from Ethan Morales, a cybersecurity attorney recommended by one of my colleagues. He was calm, analytical, the kind of man who treated emotions like data, quantifiable, containable. "You did the right thing documenting everything," he said after scanning through the evidence. "This is serious. Emily, what your mother did counts as unauthorized access and digital identity fraud. We can pursue a restraining order immediately." The word restraining order felt heavy. Final. My chest tightened. I'd spent my whole life running from her shadow, and now I was putting it in legal writing. But for the first time, I felt clarity instead of guilt. Ethan walked me through the paperwork, each signature sealing another door she could no longer open. He told me it would take a few weeks for the court to finalize the order. But he was confident. "You're not powerless here," he said, sliding the folder toward me. "You're just drawing the line in a language she can't twist." Later that week, I sat in a courtroom that smelled faintly of disinfectant and nerves. Lydia didn't show. Ryan didn't either. The judge's voice was even detached as he reviewed the case. When he said, "The court grants the restraining order effective immediately," I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Walking out into the Texas heat, the world felt wider, lighter. For once, I wasn't waiting for an apology or a knock on the door. I wasn't the abandoned daughter or the frightened child. I was someone who had chosen herself finally. In writing, justice didn't heal everything, but it stopped the bleeding. And sometimes, that's the closest thing to peace we get. For a while, I thought silence meant it was over. Weeks passed without a call, a message, or a knock on the door. I started sleeping through the night again, started believing the world had finally righted itself. But peace, I've learned, isn't the absence of noise, it's what comes before the next wave. One evening, as I settled onto my couch, my phone buzzed with a notification from the bank. "Suspicious activity detected, transfer attempt $10,000. My stomach dropped. I opened the app, and there it was, an attempted transfer blocked by two-factor authentication. Whoever tried had my account number, my details, my name. I didn't need to guess who it was. The next morning, I forwarded the alert to Ethan Morales, my lawyer, within hours. He filed a follow-up report, attaching proof that the attempt violated the restraining order. His tone was calm, efficient, but beneath it was steel. "She's not just desperate anymore," he said. "She's reckless." That night, I called Dad. He listened quietly, his sigh heavy but unsurprised. "That's Lydia," he murmured. "She'll burn bridges and still ask for the ashes back." I wanted to hate her, but what I felt instead was emptiness, a space too wide for anger, too tired for grief, somewhere between betrayal and relief. I realized I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't even need closure. What I needed was distance, real, unshakable distance. I changed every password, locked every account, froze every line of credit. It wasn't fear this time, it was control. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to her chaos. I was defining my boundaries before she could cross them. And in that quiet, decisive moment, I understood something simple. Sometimes survival looks like silence and the courage to keep it. Months slipped by, and life began to find its rhythm again. I poured myself into work, rebuilt routines, and pretended the word mother didn't sting anymore. But the past has a way of sending echoes. One afternoon, an unfamiliar number flashed on my phone. I almost ignored it until I heard the voice on the other end. "Emily, it's Eleanor Pierce. I'm your aunt." For a second, I couldn't speak. Eleanor was Lydia's older sister, the one name my father never mentioned. The one person who'd stayed out of the wreckage. Her tone was careful, like she was stepping through broken glass. "I heard what happened," she said. "You deserve to know the truth about your mother." We met that weekend at a quiet diner outside the city. Eleanor looked nothing like Lydia. Her eyes were kind, her hands steady as she stirred her coffee. She told me stories I'd never heard before, how Lydia had been addicted to gambling since her 20s, how she'd lost jobs, borrowed money from family, lied to anyone who'd still listen. "She didn't leave because she fell in love," Eleanor said softly. "She left because the debts caught up to her. Thomas tried to help, but she drained him too. When he refused to keep paying, she disappeared." The words hit like cold water. For years, I'd believed Lydia chose someone richer, that she left for a better life. But this was worse. She hadn't been chasing love. She'd been running from consequences. Eleanor reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "None of this was your fault. You were just the collateral damage." That night, driving home, I cried for the last time over a woman I'd spent a lifetime trying to understand. The truth didn't fix the past, but it gave it shape. And with that, I finally stopped looking for reasons and started forgiving myself for ever needing them. A year later, Austin felt different, brighter somehow, softer around the edges. The ghosts were still there, but they'd stopped shouting. I'd learned that peace doesn't arrive like a miracle. It's something you build, one boundary, one breath at a time. Therapy helped. Dr. Claire Anderson never told me to forgive my mother. She told me to forgive the version of myself that kept waiting for her. "You can love someone," she said, "and still choose not to let them hurt you." Those words became my anchor. I started visiting Dad every other weekend. His hands had grown stiffer, his hair grayer, but his eyes still carried that quiet pride. We'd sit outside his garage, sharing coffee, watching the sun crawl across the hood of an old pickup. He never asked about Lydia again. He didn't need to. Some stories finally rested, with his blessing. I founded the Carter Light Fund, a small scholarship for kids from broken homes, children who grew up counting coins and promises like I once did. My colleagues donated, my friends volunteered, and slowly, something beautiful took root. At the launch dinner, surrounded by the people who had chosen to stay Dad, Lila, Nora, Ben, I realized the family I'd spent decades searching for was right there. In laughter, in trust, in the absence of fear. After everyone left, Dad lingered by the door, his voice low and proud. "You turned it all into light. Emmy," I smiled. "You taught me how." That night, I stood by the window of my apartment, the city glowing below, the stars barely visible but still there. I thought of the girl I'd been the one waiting at a window for a car that never came. And for the first time, I whispered to her, "You're home now."